The movie starts with the playback of a wedding video of a newly wedded couple, B and Paul. In this video, Paul is seen describing his first date with B, where they went to an Indian restaurant which was eventually ruined because of horrible food that led to Paul's food poisoning. In the same video, B then goes on to describe how Paul proposed to her in a similar tent where they were shooting their wedding video. The newly married couple is seen crossing the Canadian border as they're heading off to spend their honeymoon in B's old family cottage. The couple soon arrives at their destination, which is located in the middle of a forest. The couple starts their romantic vacation by having fun together in the cottage. But later at night, when they're asleep, a beam of light is flashed over their faces. But none of them notice this happening, as they are in deep sleep. The next day, Paul cooks breakfast and later they go fishing in a nearby lake. Paul learns that as a kid, B often used to go fishing in the same lake and would catch fish and frogs. As the day falls, the couple returns back to their cottage and goes on wandering in search of a restaurant to eat. After a while, they see a restaurant and go inside. At first, the couple doesn't find anyone inside but soon sees an angry man breaking things. The man, Will, who is the owner of the restaurant, asks the couple to leave, stating that the restaurant is closed. But as soon as the couple is about to leave the place, Will recognizes B's face. As it turns out, Will and B are childhood friends from school. Both of them are very happy to meet each other and soon start remembering their childhood moments together. As they are reminiscing, Will's wife Annie comes in, acting very strange. Annie immediately asks the couple to leave, which makes B and Paul uncomfortable. Will then goes on to stop Annie from acting weird, saying she is not feeling well. B and Paul, who are still a little confused at this moment, leave the place. Later that night, B is still thinking about the odd behavior of Will and his wife, Annie. But when she mentions the issue with Paul, he jokingly accuses her of being an old lover of Will. The next day, Paul wakes up very early in the morning due to his alarm buzzing off at the wrong time. He thinks it's morning already and starts preparing for their fishing trip. But as he is about to leave, he notices it is still very dark outside and soon realizes he has woken up super early. He goes back to the bedroom only to discover B missing, who was there with him a few minutes ago. Paul, at first, thinks B is messing with him, so he starts calling her out. But after searching for her in the entire house, Paul starts to get a little worried. After not finding her inside the house, Paul soon goes out looking for her in the woods. After a panic search which lasted for a while, Paul finds her standing strangely in the middle of the woods, naked, all by herself. The couple then comes back to their cottage and Paul, who is freaked out at this moment, asks B about the incident. B tells Paul that she has no memory of how she got there and tries to calm him down by claiming she was probably sleepwalking. Paul finds this odd as they had been together for so many years, but B never did sleepwalking before. After that night, things starts escalating slowly as B's behavior starts changing drastically day after day. B tries her best to act normal with Paul, but Paul notices the changes in B anyway. Paul's suspicions grow even more when one day while he was messing around with B, he noticed strange marks on B's thighs as if she was bit by something. But B tries to hide the marks by claiming them to be mosquito bites and nothing to worry about. Paul, who is now pretty sure that B is hiding something from him, goes back into the woods to investigate. On his way, Paul finds B's nightgown, the one she was wearing the night she went missing. The nightgown is found completely torn and covered in some kind of mucus as if somebody ripped it off from B's body. After returning back to the house, Paul finds B rehearsing in the bathroom on how she will turn down Paul's approaches for sex later at night, even though they are on their honeymoon. Later that night, as things are about to get intimate between Paul and B, she refuses his advances exactly like she had practiced earlier. Paul, who is frustrated and confused by B's strange behavior, finally decides to confront her about it. Paul asks her about her nightgown and demands she wears it now. But B lies to him, saying it is mixed in her dirty laundry and cannot wear it right now. As the night sets in, the beam of light starts flashing again with a continuous humming sound and is eventually spotted by Paul. Paul, thinking it is Will outside the house, arms himself with a shotgun and goes out to check. The tension builds as Paul starts following a strange shadow in the woods but stops after a few minutes by firing a warning shot in the sky. Paul then turns back to find B standing, who is awakened by the gunshot. Upon returning, Paul again confronts B to come explain to him what is going on. Paul then goes on to bring out the nightgown he found in the woods and the couple starts arguing on this issue. B, who is caught in her lies, is still not ready to tell him the exact truth. Paul even suspects that something is going on between Will and B, but B denies everything. After a long argument, both of them sleep separately in different rooms. The next day, we see B scribbling something in a diary. When Paul asks her about it, B quickly shuts the notebook saying it's nothing. Later that day, they decide to go fishing together. On their trip, Paul tells B that he doesn't want to stay at this place any longer and wants to return back to the city. But B tries to make him stay by saying their honeymoon is not over yet. Frustrated by her obvious rehearsed responses, Paul goes on to pleasure her while they are on their boat. But to their surprise, Paul pulls out a handful of blood instead. B had started bleeding. The couple then quickly rush back to the shore and back to their cottage. B is seen acting completely normal to the incident that just happened. She tells Paul that it's probably due to her periods, but Paul insists that it is not. He keeps on pressuring B that something is not right with her and she should be immediately consulted by a doctor. Paul then leaves the house after telling B that they will leave this place once he returns. In search of answers for the unusual events that have been taking place in the past few days, Paul reaches Will's house. Paul instead meets Annie there, who starts acting even weirder than before. Paul asks her about Will, but she tells him to go away, stating it's not safe. Paul then notices the same strange marks on Annie's thighs as well, similar to that of B. Annie then goes away on a boat. While trying to sneak into Will's house, Paul notices a security camera installed on the main door which is linked to the computer inside. Paul goes inside Will's house and starts using Will's computer, browsing through the footage from the security camera. The tension starts to build up as Paul sees Annie leaving the house in the middle of the night with a bright light shining on her, just like the one he had seen the other night back at his house. But before Paul could investigate further, there's a power fluctuation and then the computer shuts down. The lights around the house start flickering when Paul notices papers pasted on the wall full of Annie's handwriting which reads, "I'm Annie. My husband is Will," and similar other details. Paul remembers seeing B write similar information about her just earlier that day. There is a worried look on Paul's face as he notices the same mucus on the papers as on B's nightgown that he had found in the woods. Paul then runs back to the cottage to confront B. He tells her about the Annie incident and that they need to go away from this place as soon as possible. Filled with panic and fear, Paul then starts searching for the car keys but couldn't find them. After not finding the keys, frustrated Paul starts looking for B's diary. Upon finding the diary, Paul finally confirms that similar information was written on papers in Will's house. Paul then goes on to confront B, asking her who she actually is. Paul's logic is that if she were actually B, she wouldn't have to write such information about herself in the diary. But B still refuses all of his suspicions, claiming she is indeed his wife, B. After asking her a series of questions, Paul comes to the conclusion that the person cannot be his wife that he had known all his life. He then ties B's hands and legs to the bed so that she cannot escape. After a while, Paul notices the same strange mucus coming out of B's body. To his horror, Paul pulls out a strange alien creature from B's womb while she is screaming in pain. Confused and terrified, Paul then unties B to set her free. The couple then goes outside of the house where B finally starts explaining what had actually happened that night when she was found in the woods. According to B, that night she was pulled by some light flashing outside the house, just like Paul had seen Annie go outside, in the security camera footage. B then goes on to add that she didn't know what was actually happening to her as there was darkness all over the place, but soon a strange shadow-like creature entered her body and presumably impregnated her. B then tells Paul that she still feels that creature inside her body and will never be able to get it out of her. B also tells him that she didn't involve Paul in this horrifying situation because she wanted to save his life. Paul starts assuring her, saying everything will soon be fine and he won't let anyone take her away. But moments later, the same light starts flashing on B again and she starts acting weird once again. Paul is then knocked out unconscious by B by hitting him on his head. The next day, Paul wakes to find himself in a boat with his hands and legs all tied up. He finds B sitting next to him, who kept on repeating that there's only one way to save Paul's life, by keeping him underwater. B then proceeds on pushing the anchor down the water which is tied to Paul's body. Paul, filled with panic, starts to question B's decision and begs her to stop. B finally pushes Paul off the boat, down into the lake. Later we see B, whose face is now completely deformed, inside the cottage watching her wedding video. She is then met by Annie, whose face is deformed too, just like B. The movie ends with the shot of B and Annie following the same beam of light shining. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.